What is going on, people of the world? We are back with another collaboration with Mental Warfare and the Release Valve. I am your co-host, Kyle Spain, and yet again, my right-hand man, Sean Hanlon. How are we doing today, and who do we have on the show? Who are we blessed with today?
Yes, sir. We got another special guest here tonight. We are privileged to have a good friend with us. One of the main topics of discussion that kind of comes up a lot is parenting, and all the different ways that can look for all of us, right? So we are joined by someone else to help give us some more perspective on some of the things that we go through and help widen our ever broadening horizon on understanding of what it's like in the real world, right? So without further ado, we are joined by my good friend Jen.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Jen.
How's it going, Jen? Nice to meet you. Pleasure to have
You
you on the show.
too. I'm excited to
Absolutely.
be here. This is my first podcast experience. So
Yeah.
my
Oh,
daughter even asked if she could do it, and I was like, it's past your bedtime. So.
the vibes were definitely up before we got started here. But why don't you give us a little bit of your background about a little bit of your history and what you've got going on and how you led to where you're at now, or what led you to where you're at now?
Sure. It's kind of a weird storyline, I guess. So
Well, that's even
I
better.
started working with kids from the time I was a senior in high school. So I always
Okay.
kind of knew I wanted to be a teacher. Um, so yeah, I was basically working at a daycare, helping run it most of the time, which was
Oh, wow.
weird at that age, but
Yeah.
um, I guess I was just good at what I did. I loved being around the kids. I think because I was a kid myself back then. So yeah, so then I went to school for it. I got my bachelor's in early childhood and psychology.
Okay.
And then I was teaching kindergarten at a private daycare, and then I moved to Puerto Rico for 4 years. So,
Oh, wow,
and I
that's
taught down
awesome.
there. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I taught down there. I did rescue work down there for animals, which is a whole other podcast in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I won't get into that. But yeah, I've just always worked with kids. So then, fast forward, we moved back to Massachusetts. We moved back home. Um, and I kind of like steered towards working with animals. So I did that for a little bit, and then I got pregnant with my oldest, who's six and a
Okay.
half. So things were gonna change, and
Oh,
we were trying to figure out, do I wanna, you know, be a stay-at-home mom? Do I wanna put her in daycare? But then when the time came, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't
okay.
I couldn't walk away, and you know, which I understand, it's nothing against kids, people who put their kids in daycare, but for me, I just couldn't do it. So
Yeah,
I
it's
became a
tough.
stay-at-home mom. Best decision I've ever made. I can't imagine not doing it. And then through being a stay-at-home mom, and then I think my story is kind of similar to what other people went through. And during the pandemic, we had
Mm.
to take her out of preschool. I found out I was pregnant with my second child, and I decided I was gonna, do preschool at home because I had been a preschool teacher, I had been a kindergarten teacher, that was like my jam.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, we started doing that without the intention of it being a long-term thing.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Um, but because I went into it and I had this perception of what homeschooling was, and we can talk about that later. And
Hmm.
I realized during that time I was very wrong. So yeah, so we continued to homeschool and we love it. So that's kind of the abridged version of of my story, I guess. So.
No. Okay. Well, did you learn any Spanish? Did you know Spanish before going to Puerto Rico, or
No,
do you
not a
learn? Do you
lick.
know Spanish? Oh.
I know more now. It's funny. I like understand it better when I hear it, but I can't speak it for the life of me. And
Yeah.
even when I was down
Understand.
there, I have these memories of I would go to like the grocery store or I would go to like Starbucks or whatever and I would try to speak in Spanish and they would just be like, "It's okay. We'll just speak English." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm
We
trying."
speak your language. It's fine.
Yes.
But
Shit.
Yes.
they
So,
like when people try though. They respect when people
oh, for
actually
sure.
try to
Yeah.
get into what they have going
Yeah.
on there. And as long as you're willing, man, they're good sport about that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the
Yeah, and
warfare in
everyone I
itself,
worked
right?
with, yeah, and everyone I worked with was amazing. But I worked at an English speaking school, so I feel like
Ah,
I was kind of,
right.
I wasn't forced into it the way that
Yeah.
I think if I was under
Yeah.
different circumstances. So yeah, but I
Yeah.
miss it. But I'm glad we're back, but I also miss it. So it's like weird.
Sure. And now, was it younger kids that you were teaching in Puerto Rico too?
Yeah, so when I first moved down there, I worked as like a teacher's assistant, as most people do when they first start working. Because it was so down there, there's not really many public schools. Most kids go to private schools. At least that was my experience. Like you got cut off for a second there. Um, but so yeah, I was a teaching assistant and then they have like pre-K down there, which is like preschool for us, and then
Okay.
pre-K in kindergarten. So I worked all of those grades. The last year I was there, I did kindergarten and it was the best. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I've always worked. I have my degrees in early childhood education, which is like from preschool to second grade. And then they have elementary education, which is like from first grade to sixth grade.
Okay.
So yeah, I've always been with the little
All
guys.
right. Well, that's cool. Let's talk a little bit about your initial perception on homeschooling.
So I always joke that I was like that teacher where I'm like, only crazy people homeschool their kids and they're not
Yeah.
socialized and they don't learn anything. Um, which I know a lot of people that still mention those things to me, even though they're so far from the truth. But I also had a very limited experience of like I didn't know like many homeschool kids and or I didn't have friends that were homeschooled. So I only had that kind of universal perception of what homeschooling was. Um, but then, you know, you meet other families and you're like, "Oh, your kid isn't weird or your kid isn't antisocial or you're like and they're just normal families that just like for me, the best part of homeschooling 100% is you can do stuff whenever you want. Like if we want to take a trip to Disney in the middle of September, we can do
That's
that
awesome.
because we don't have to,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to meet certain criteria, but, yeah, initially I was like, oh, I'm not going to do this long term. I want her to like be socialized and have friends. And that's the big thing you hear socialization, socialization all the time. I still hear it, even though we've been doing this for a few years now. Um, but yeah, it was so far from the truth. And I don't know, I guess because like with anything, yes, homeschooling, if you do a certain way, of course, can be isolating to kids. But 99%, if not 99.9% of families, when they're homeschooling, they're out doing things all the time. Their kids are around other kids, around other adults, and it's the least isolating like type of schooling in my opinion
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, they won't be able to function in the real world if they're not learning how to do it in school. And it's like, well, my kids are actually out in the real world experiencing it
Yeah.
Yeah.
firsthand.
Okay.
So
So, what situations then would like I mean, can you give me just like a couple of examples of the situations in the context which your kids would socialize? Because that's really my only concern with homeschooling, and I do have an additional question as well. But
Yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, go ahead.
So my kids, so yeah, as far as like their socialization, um, I'll talk about my 6.5-year-old because my other daughter is 2, so she's kind of just like our little
Yeah.
mascot. So for my 6.5-year-old, a typical week. So she was in kindergarten this past year, so she's going to be moving into our first grade curriculum. Um, and some people don't even do grades, but for my brain, that's just how I organize
Yeah,
homeschooling.
yeah.
But
Yeah, no.
so for her, for a 6-year-old kindergartner, she is doing karate, she's in dance, she does a half day homeschool program, which is incredible. I definitely encourage people to look into it if they have it in their areas. So basically, these women, these homeschool moms started this program, and you can it's kind of like a day program, like you drop them off. You can kind of decide, do I want them to go for a half day? Do I want them to go to a full day? As the kids get older, they have, science fairs, they have like drama clubs, they put on plays. They have these things that, a school would typically have. So for her age, she goes once a week for half a day. Um, and she's with all other homeschool kids. So
That's
she
relatability.
she isn't yeah, she's not being called like, "Oh, you're
Right.
weird because you're homeschooled." It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, we're all homeschooled
Right.
too."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not like she's,
She doesn't feel left
she
out.
stands
Right.
out
She
in the
doesn't feel left
crowd.
out, or like like she doesn't fit in. She fits in perfectly.
Isolated.
Right. And it's incredible. Like when I brought her to do the meet and greet, to see if it would work for her, the women there, with her group, because she's in lower elementary, they were like getting out all these kids are working together to get out a folding
Yeah,
table
that's
and
awesome.
folding chairs so they can have lunch. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
like they don't do that. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never knew how to unfold a
Yeah.
cafeteria table
No, there was
like when
nothing
I was
awkward about that
younger.
at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they, yeah, they definitely encourage the independence. So she does that. And then um, Sean's wife and I, who have been friends for almost 20 years now, which is crazy to say. But, we have our little homeschool group with a few friends, and they're all around the same age. So, we do things together. We go on nature walks. We love to be outside. Sometimes we used to do like little unit studies so the kids can learn and work together, or they'll just do a craft, or they'll just play together. So between extracurriculars, between her homeschooling groups, there are days where I'm like, I just don't want to see anybody. Like,
Yeah.
we're with other people all the time, and I'm like, all right, we need to like slow down
Just as much, if
because
not more, because at a time that the kids would normally be in a classroom, like you said, you're out there in the real world doing all these things
Yeah,
with
you're
other
actually you're
people.
getting it's like the schooling system is almost what's it called? It's almost the internship, and you're already in the field.
yeah,
So I mean that's
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's really nice perspective. I guess my next question is to give me a little bit more. Is your family,
hmm
are you originally from Massachusetts?
Yeah,
And,
yep,
and
born and
so
raised.
so your family,
So, yeah.
your family's all there and stuff like that. And so are you like able to
Yeah.
drop your kids off and but basically my question is, where do you get your relief from like your kids? Like, and like my question is the reason,
That is a
yeah, the
great
reason why,
question.
right, the reason why I asked that is because, like the whole, like everyone in the world, we went through that whole COVID situation, and we were kind of forced in the whole homeschooling or the school at home, which is a completely different context, right? Because we were constricted and confined to our house. and so that was a little bit of insanity in itself. So that's a little bit different. But we're out here in
Cabin
Texas.
fever.
Yeah, we're out here in Texas, and all of my family's back in California, so we don't really have much relief. And so imagining like the thought of having my kids for all day. I mean, every day, as much as they get them, as much as I love them, they get on my nerves a little bit, right? We don't we don't have that relief, and so are you able to get that relief, and how do you get that relief?
I really appreciate that question because some people don't always think to ask homeschool parents that. Um, at least in my experience with homeschooling parents I know, some of them love being with their kids all day, every day, which is wonderful. Like, I talk to those people and I'm like, that's great. I'm not one of them.
And that's
So
okay
for
too.
me, yes, exactly. Like, so for me, my husband is crazy supportive. So, like, the second he gets home, you know, I'm like,
Tag.
I
Your
need,
turn. You're in.
yeah, tag, you're it. Like, I need, like, give me 15 minutes to
Yeah.
just, like, sit in silence. And
Absolutely.
you know how you never realize how loud something
Yeah.
is until it's
Yeah,
quiet?
absolutely.
I feel that, like, every day of my
And
life.
sometimes that silence can be
But
deafening too. Like when you're so used to all the
yeah,
noise and then you get that, it's like, oh my gosh, it's too quiet. Like something's not right
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Oh,
depending on.
I haven't gotten to that point yet.
that's
Like,
good.
I still crave that quiet
You're not
sometimes,
completely broken yet.
but yeah, I'm lucky enough where yeah, I have a really supportive partner, and I
Awesome.
think if I didn't have that, I don't think it would work. Um,
Yeah.
I think you have to both be in
Yeah.
it to, like with any
I mean,
parenting,
and they
like
say it takes a village,
it
right?
takes two to
Well,
tango.
they say it takes a
Yeah,
village now, like because
100%.
it
depending on the
does.
personality of your kid, um, they can be a couple of handfuls in themselves, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
takes an uncle, an aunt, a couple of uncles, a couple of aunts, grandmas, and
Grandparents and
grandparents,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get that type of relief.
Yeah, and we're like I'm lucky enough where, my in-laws are, 35 minutes away.
Okay.
My parents are 30. We're kind of like in the middle, like they're 35 minutes away.
hmm
Um, so like, sometimes my oldest will go and do a sleepover or set up a play date
hmm
and, just drop her off at my parents' house. But I also, one thing that kind of keeps me sane is my youngest still naps, thank God, hopefully for a little while longer. Um, so during that time while she's napping, my oldest, even though she's almost 7, she'll go and have rest time.
Nice.
So it's like an hour or two a day where I'm like, okay, you can play a game on the iPad, or you can go and, make crafts in the basement,
hmm
or,
You had two
go
girls?
and do something. I have 2 girls, yeah.
Okay.
So that time in the middle of the day is how I stay sane.
hmm
Yeah.
Whether I choose to do, get some laundry done or do chores or, do the dishes, whatever, or I will just sit there and like read a book or, sometimes I fall asleep
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
like especially this last week when I've had a sick kiddo, so it's just been like, you know, overdrive on everything. So yeah, it definitely takes a village. I think for some people it's hard, like for you, because you do live out of state. So in those cases, you kind of find your family away from home. I know that's how I didn't have kids at the time, but that's how it was for me when we lived, a 3-hour flight away from our families. And you find that village. And for me, those are my fellow homeschool moms, where even if we're with our kids. We're like, okay, go play in the sprinkler. We're gonna, sit and talk and have some adult
Yeah.
time. So finding that balance for the parent is definitely a game changer
Absolutely.
because, like I said, some people love it. They love to be with their kids 24/7, which is great, but it overstimulates my brain and
Yeah.
I just can't do
You
it.
got to be
So
able to
finding
recharge
those
your
little
battery a little bit.
pockets, yeah,
Release.
finding those little
Release, that's
pockets of
right.
time. Yeah, whether it's, an hour, while they're sleeping or like finding time to have a girls' night and go out to dinner with some friends
Absolutely.
or, and that all kind of stems back where you have to have a supportive partner and you have to have supportive, people around you. It
Yeah,
makes all the
it
difference.
really does. And it starts with communication, right? Especially with your
Mhm.
partner, having that communication and letting them know, where you're at with things, finding out where they're at with things, and finding out how to approach those situations, and finding out where that balance can be had, right? I think that's huge that you were saying about your husband coming home and just being able to take on, and whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you need to just, like I said, reset your battery a little bit, or to be able to have that time and freedom to approach all those other things that you want to get done or need to get done in the way that you're looking to do it, instead of trying to juggle all these other things and get that stuff done at the same time. But
Mhm.
communication is so key with that, because my wife and I, we are, as you know, we're in a very similar situation as you. You guys have your co-op group together and stuff like that, but obviously that's not every day, and you're not always going to have a break when you have things going on with the kids. So to have that communication with your partner and have that understanding, and be able to have that balance of being able to tag and allow yourself that time for whatever it is, like I said, to recharge your battery a little bit, and then get back to, being a mom or being a wife, and all the other things, a homeowner or whatever it is that you need to take on. But sometimes, if you're, I mean, not sometimes, if you're not able to get that break, and have that balance, and you got all that weight just tipping on that one side, that's that recipe for disaster. That's when people are getting overwhelmed, and like I said, a recipe for disaster. It's just a downward spiral from there.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there have been times where, my husband's had to go for, a conference for work and he's gone for a week. And by the time he comes back, I'm like, oh my God, I
Now
just
I need a
need
week.
24 hours. I need 24 hours of
Yeah.
nobody talking to me and nobody touching me and nobody asking me a question.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
It is.
yeah, I have been there. And then you also don't want to get so overwhelmed and so overstimulated to the point where you like blow up, because I've done that too, where I'm just like go go go, okay, and in my mind there's the list of everything I need to get
That's the
done,
warfare.
and then my daughter's like, mommy, can I do this, can I do that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like just give me a
Yeah.
sec, and then I'm like, I'm sorry I yelled, like
Oh.
I just need to take some deep breaths.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you also, you know any parent, whether you homeschool or not, but especially for stay at home parents, you need to give yourself, first of all, you need to give yourself some grace because there's no perfect parent out
Right.
there. But you also need to almost schedule your time so and prioritize your own sanity and your own mental health, because like what's the quote, you can't pour from a cup that's empty. Like you can't take care of little humans that you're in charge of raising if you can't even take care of yourself. So if you're run down and burnt out, there's no way that you can parent, your child. So
Exactly.
so yeah, finding
For
that time.
everyone in the world that is listening to this, that is the key factor. That is one of the key phrases right there, what you just said. And that is the almost the answer to everything that we're trying to do. It's that personal development. And it's a part of all of it. It kind of just all integrates into to that personal development, because we can't be our best selves. We can't be our best selves to the other people. We can't be the best father, husband, or boyfriend, whatever the case be. We can't be that best person to anybody else if we're not focusing on our own healing and growth. So,
Hmm.
uh, and that's the warfare of it all, right? That list that you're talking about, everything that we have to attack. It's overwhelming. It's exhausting. It's like, man, I just need a rest. I need to release. I need to express. You need to
Mm-hmm.
connect with other people that are going through the same thing, like you're having your girls' day or the sprinkler party or whatever it is. But you're able to
Mhm.
talk about, how hectic things have been on a daily, or it's like, oh my goodness, and they're saying, oh my goodness, my day has been hectic too, right? And then it's like, oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one internally, right? It's just like,
Right.
Exactly.
right? It's like,
Then you
man,
get that release.
right? It's just like, oh, okay.
But I think too, like, and I don't know if fathers experience or feel the pressure as much as mothers do. That could be like, you know, a totally biased thing to say, but I feel like there's so much pressure on moms, especially all moms, stay at home moms, working moms, where you have to put your kids
Yeah.
first. And it's like, if you don't put your kids first, you're selfish.
Hey,
And
the
like,
state of mom.
how could you?
Hey, okay,
Yeah.
Hey.
And it's like,
okay.
you're,
I'll write that
and you're
down.
taught that. Like, I've always had this in my
Yeah,
mind. Like, if I try to do something for myself, I'm selfish if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
putting my kids before me. And like, and that it's not that I don't put my kids first, but if I, like you said, if you don't take care of yourself, there's no way you can take care of anybody
right.
else. So I think for mothers especially, or stay-at-home parents, it's so important for the people around them to really see them and see what they're going through, because they might not always want to communicate that, hey, I need a break,
Yeah.
because they have it in their mind, well, I'm being selfish. I need to just get over it, and I need to,
What does
do what
that
I'm
look
supposed
like
to
if I
do.
if
And
I say that I can't mom?
Yeah,
If I'm not
yeah,
capable of
yeah,
right,
being a parent
yeah,
right now,
yeah.
what does that look
you
like?
can't
It's
human.
tough,
You
Yeah,
right?
can't
yeah,
even
yeah.
human when you get to that stage.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like
exactly,
you just
exactly.
become so
You know what?
overwhelmed. Yeah.
I was blessed in hindsight. Yeah, I'm definitely blessed, but blessed to have had that experience. My situation kind of the roles in my household switched in the whole pandemic, right? Because I was a basketball player, and during COVID, basketball, at least my league wasn't playing, and so
Mm-hmm.
my wife ended up getting a bartending job, and I ended up becoming a stay-at-home dad. Waiting for everything to open back up. And let me tell you, it was it was a newsflash. It was like, whoa, like this
Culture shock.
culture. It was a lot. It was, and even to this day now, I train at the Y. I'm a trainer at the Y, but I have my kids a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
have them a lot. And I guess that was where that question was derived from. It's just like that not having that sense of relief when you need it, because it's like I can't even think about homeschooling them right now. First of all, we already did it through the COVID and hated it. Like it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, what is this? It's like we're right. It's like we're doing figuring out the whole homework thing, and it's just like we're at the teacher. We're basically the teacher, right? We were having to teach our kids and help them with their homework. So it was like double duty.
But it was very
Oh yeah,
different.
no, for sure. It was
So,
nothing. I'm not saying it has anything to do.
because
Right.
it's like there's
Oh, virtual.
like
Right.
the
Yes.
virtual homeschooling compared to actual homeschooling. I like can't even, I mean, I know Sean went through it with his stepson. Like they're in front of a computer all day, and then you're trying to like, like
Yeah.
finagle, like, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. Okay, what do we do? Like, yeah,
Okay.
it's a whole other
Okay. So,
beast when it comes to virtual
okay. Well, that's
schooling.
perfect then. If you can give us a little perspective of what a day in the life of homeschooling looks like. How does that work? If you're is as far in the difference between virtual learning and homeschooling, what would you say the difference is?
So, as far as, I mean, it's like I said, it's like two completely separate beasts. So if you look back, what most kids did during the pandemic that were doing school on the computer, at least this is, I would watch my nieces because my sister was a teacher at the time. So she's trying to do her own virtual classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has two kids that she, needs help with. So I kind of watched my nieces during periods of time during the pandemic. And I watched my niece who was in first grade, I believe at the time, and she's sitting there in front of a computer, and the teachers did their best. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you're anti-school because you homeschool, and I'm like, that is the furthest thing from the truth. I think schools are amazing. I think teachers are underrated superheroes. Like I could talk about that all night,
100%.
but they're, for kids that are virtual schooling, like there were times where it's like those kids had to be in front of the computer for X amount of hours and they couldn't like
Yeah,
leave.
there
Like
was no
they had
relief.
to be seen.
Right, there was coop. They were just, like you said, confined.
Yeah, so they had their faces, like they had to physically be seen by the teacher to make sure that they were, focused and getting their
And
Yeah.
that's
time
hard
in.
for a kid because
yeah.
you're in your
Yeah.
comfortable place at home having to act like you're in a classroom and your teacher's not physically right in front of you. So you're in your place of, this is where I do whatever I want, act
Yeah.
however I want, where I'm comfortable and I can, do all these things, but I can't. I'm supposed to be here focused on this screen thing and pay attention. And I mean, I know it was hard enough for me as a kid to pay attention in school, and I was in public school. I just didn't do well in that type of structure. My brain, my attention span wasn't
Yeah.
able to stay up with that. So I can only imagine if it was just in front of a computer and having to sit there in all day long. Like I would lose my mind. My TV's right there.
I mean,
I can see my TV.
I even knew of teachers. Yeah, I even knew of teachers where they were like, I wanted to do an activity where they had to like go on like a scavenger hunt around their house, and I wasn't even really supposed to do it because then they were leaving the screen and they weren't present. So it was like they weren't like they had to account for the kids. And then parents, who a lot of them started working virtually, some of them during that time, they're trying to work as they're trying to help their kids. Like it was just a mess. And, at least with our pediatrician, you go to the pediatrician and they're like, how much time are they spending in front of a screen? And it's like, and trust me, I am pro screen time. I would not be able to be a functioning parent without TV some days. So it's not that I'm anti-screens, but
No, 8
your
hours on
kid
the
is
screen.
sitting in front of a screen for like 6 hours.
That's a lot of.
So
and then getting off and jumping to another screen and doing something, on there.
Right.
So that's a lot.
That's a lot of screen time.
So yeah, that was kind of, in an abbreviated version, what virtual schooling was like for a lot of kids during the pandemic. Homeschooling for us is the complete opposite. So and this was kindergarten, and every family is different depending on the grades or needs of the child or whatever. For us, we would do like 2 hours of school in the morning, and that would be it. And then, my daughter would have extracurriculars in the afternoon, or we would do something else. There were days where we didn't even do like sit down work. We would go to a museum, or we would go, on a nature walk, or, our backyard is woods. So we would, go explore in the woods. You think about kids in a classroom, and I was a classroom teacher. So like, again, this is the norm and they're doing great, but I just couldn't picture my child sitting in a classroom for X amount of hours a day when they thrive when they're outside. And, my daughter can go outside and be like, hey, that's an oak tree, or hey, that's a,
like you said,
stink bug, or hey, that's
in
a
the field.
pileated woodpecker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, for us, like the world is our classroom. We get to go out into the world,
I love that.
whether it's the beach, whether it's a museum, whether like we've gone to local farms, we've talked to, local business owners, so many different experiences that if she was in a classroom, she wouldn't get to
Yeah.
experience. So, you know, and people don't always see that. They either think, oh, well, she's not doing anything with her. She's not going to be able to read or write or, tell people her name. But yet my child can be like, oh my gosh, that like her favorite artist is Vincent van Gogh. For her 6th birthday, we had a Starry Night cake. So,
Nice.
if she was in school, she may not have experienced or, been exposed to that because we do artist
Yeah.
studies and we, do music stuff. And it's so different than what people perceive it as, of like either you're sitting at a table, drilling stuff into your kid's head. And in the homeschool world, we say like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do school at home, like take the public school and bring it at home. You have to make it your own. And for some kids, they thrive on that. They thrive on sitting there and being able to, do their work and write stuff down and use the resources. Other kids, like you were saying, you had a hard time sitting still in school. For kids like that, making them sit in a desk is not going to help their learning. Like those types of kids need to move their body, or they need to be outside and breathe fresh air.
That's
and
heavy.
Learn things in a way that's interesting to them, because when you're in a classroom, I mean, to no fault of the teachers, they have so many students, right? So they have to generalize the way that they teach these things. But when you're able to do homeschooling, you're able to kind of personalize it and customize it to their natural interests. If you have a kid, for example, they have the worksheet and they're doing math on there, and it's hard for them to look at all these things that they have to count. But if you can go outside and make them count sticks or something like that, maybe that's a little more interesting to them, and it's a little more hands-on, and they're able to pick it up a little bit easier. You're able to find those different ways that works best for your kids, and base your teaching around that. Yeah. Whereas when you're in a classroom, you can't
100%.
exactly, customize it to every single child, especially the older they get. You get more and more students coming through. You just can't do it.
Yeah, and that's hard too, because as a teacher, they tell you have to differentiate instruction. You have to differentiate, which means, okay, if a child comes in, like you said, and they're not grasping this concept, you have to tweak it so that every child understands. But what teachers are facing now is you have classrooms with sometimes like 25, 30 kids. And it's like they're overwhelmed, they're underfunded. And like you said, to no fault of their own, they are trying their best.
Not enough individual attention.
Help these kids, to do right by these kids. And I mean, it's not a good time to be a teacher. I mean, I've had this conversation with countless teachers. I have family members, neighbors, friends that are teachers, and from multiple people who don't even know each other have all kind of said the same thing to me. And they're like, we went from being superheroes during the pandemic, and now we're being, hung out to dry for various reasons. So, I feel lucky that I have the ability and the capability to homeschool my kids. Like, whether it's financially, or because a lot of families, because some people will be like, well, everybody should homeschool their kids. And I'm like, well, I guess you're speaking from a place of privilege, because not everybody can homeschool their kids.
I love how you brought that up, because I was going to add, my question was going to be, obviously it'd be a question that you wouldn't wouldn't have the answer to because you have a girl. And you, not to say that you have a girl, because if even for a girl, let me take that back. I guess personality actually plays a huge part
Mm-hmm.
in whether or not, you know, because I'm speaking for myself. My son is what, like Sean describes. He's wild, which is why I love what you're saying too. Because like I'm starting to second guess this, or second think, or giving a second this home. Oh my gosh, giving this homeschooling a second thought.
I get what
Yeah,
you're
giving this
saying.
homeschool a second thought, because my son, very intelligent boy, but he's got those ADHD symptoms, and he just needs to be able to get out and stuff like that. But do you think that would be something challenging for a parent that's trying to homeschool as well?
So a lot of families that I have met, so it depends on the severity, I guess. So I know families who their kids have ADHD, their kids are on, have autism, they have learning disabilities, they, neurodivergent stuff going on. Um, and they've actually pulled their kids from school because when it comes to special
Okay.
education, and again, I'm saying this from my my friends'
Mm-hmm.
experience. I've never directly experienced, but I see what my friends go through. And especially when it comes to kids who are on IEPs, who are on 504s, which they need they have specialized
Yeah,
education plans.
that makes sense.
Um, it's an uphill
Yeah.
battle. They have to fight tooth and nail to get accommodations for
Mm-hmm.
their kids. Um, and it's heartbreaking. So a lot of those people, depending on what's going on, will pull their kids out of school and homeschool them. But what some people also don't understand is even if you homeschool your child and they still qualify for um, OT or PT or speech therapy or anything like that, the public school has to provide that.
Mm-hmm.
So, even those people who are pulling their kids because they're like, listen, my kid has ADHD, they cannot sit, they're not learning in an environment that's conducive to their learning
Mm-hmm.
style or whatever it may be. And they're like, I'm pulling them. And they either do, because there's a million different styles of homeschooling as well. So they might be like, all right, we're going to do some unschooling or nature based schooling, and we're just going to, let our kid run wild. But they're not actually running wild because their child
They're
is learning something as they're moving their
being
body.
stimulated in a
Yeah.
way that,
So
yeah.
kids,
Okay.
so
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. So I feel like I could go off on so many tangents about that. But, um, so yeah, I think for a lot of parents, like let's say if your son was diagnosed with ADHD, you're like, listen, he's not learning to the best of his ability in a classroom setting. You can say, hey, we're going to homeschool him. Um, but if he qualifies for services, the school has to provide it. Um, and most kids I've met that are neurodivergent who homeschool, they're
Yeah.
thriving because they're learning in a way
That's
that
conducive.
works
Yeah,
for
that's
them.
conducive to their situation. No, I love that. Thank you for providing that,
Yeah.
because that provides a lot of perspective. And in the way I was perceiving it would be a challenge, but it's actually more beneficial because they're getting that individual attention. They're getting that special need and that special education that they actually need.
And they're getting that, like you guys talk about, they're getting that release. They're not, because you think about, like, let's just talk ADHD because you were saying your son,
Hmm.
has a hard time sitting still and stuff. So let's picture a child with ADHD in a classroom. So they're sitting there, and again, this isn't a blanket statement. I know there are teachers out there who accommodate incredibly for kids,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't always do it. So a child with ADHD is sitting in a classroom, and instead of focusing on what they need to learn, they're like, okay, I need to sit still. I need to not bite my nails. I need to
Exactly.
not,
Yeah.
like
You're thinking about all the
they're
things that you're
focusing
supposed to
so
be
much
doing
on
right, and then sometimes when you're so focused on what you're supposed to be doing right and pay attention and make sure I write notes or whatever it is, then you get called out because you are not actually paying attention to what they're saying to you, or sometimes they'll call you to ask a question or something like that. And like, man, I wasn't paying attention, and you can then get perceived as a behavioral problem and a distraction for the other kids in the class.
Yeah.
Or disruptive to everybody else. So if you start getting negative attention because you're not able to pay attention, then you start feeling like there's something wrong with you and that you are a problem. And if things aren't working out and you're getting in trouble because you just are having a hard time focusing, then you, like I said, you start feeling like you have something wrong with you, and that can have some long-term negative effects in itself.
That's heavy.
Oh, for sure.
I was actively, my son, we tried to get him tested for ADHD, but he didn't have enough of the criteria. So they were like, no, he doesn't. Come to find out that he just, I told Sean about this. He has a tongue restriction, and he's tongue tied, and so it restricts it, or it makes him a mouth breather, and he can't sleep. And because of the lack of sleep, he has ADHD symptoms. But because he had ADHD symptoms and he wasn't getting enough sleep, that would carry over into public school, and those similar situations would happen. Like my kid, listen, Tyson is my son's name. He is actually one of our teacher told us that he was one of probably the top student in the class, while dealing with ADHD symptoms, right? And so that just I'm grateful to say that, but that just leads me to believe that there's more potential for him.
It's just possibly different avenues that can be taken.
Exactly, to actually exploit all of his skills and his attributes. And so that might be an avenue, like you said, that might be able to be taken in order for his personal development, right? For his growth.
Yeah.
And
you know what was on most of my report cards growing up? Sean is very smart, all these positive things, but it was always at the bottom, socializes too much. They would have all these compliments and all these things.
Because you don't socialize in school.
Yeah.
That's what they always say.
But he socializes
right?
too much. I was like, because I got to talk
Tyson.
to somebody,
that's
man.
My son. My son is like, especially he's hyped to go to school, not to learn, so he can chat it up with his boys. Like with his people.
Yeah, that's where all the homies are at.
Yeah. That's where all my people are at. Oh
yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Jen.
But a lot of the time it's so interesting. So if you do a deep dive on like the famous people of the world, whether it's famous authors or famous artists or composers or actors or whatever, you'll find that a lot of them were problem kids, or they
Socially
were
awkward.
stupid, quote unquote, or they had an inability to learn and things like that. Because the thing with kids that are neurodivergent is they think outside the box, because they have to accommodate for themselves because they're learning in a different way. You think about someone who has dyslexia, like they're constantly adapting and accommodating themselves, and they're changing the way that their brain works. They're creating new neural pathways, and they're learning new ways of doing things. So a lot of the time, those kids that have ADHD or whatever, autism or whatever it may be, they're so smart, but because of those quote unquote trouble behaviors, they're not being seen for what they really are. And I feel like for me, whenever I see a behavior in an adult or a child, and maybe it's my psychology background, but there's always a reason for that behavior. And it's like, okay, if...
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, that's part of the connection, right? Because I'm a psychology, I have a bachelor in psychology as well. And that's just kind of something.
I knew it.
Yeah, that's kind of just it's kind of something.
I was waiting for you to say it.
It's kind of something that me and Sean, this is where we actually connected with. It was just a different level of thinking when it comes to behavioral, human behavior and the way people think. And that is exactly, and I hate to cut you off, but that was just a gem because ever since starting this podcast has even more so allowed me to when I see somebody and they're like having a bad day, like when we talked about Sean in the previous episode of like, well, how's your day going? And it's like, okay, whatever. Obviously, they're going through something, but there is a reason as to why they're going through something. And a lot of us have childhood trauma, so it's allowed me to become a lot more aware of like, what are they going through? What's their warfare? They're dealing with something. Are they feeling alone? Like they need some love. Probably. Well, everyone does.
And it makes you, yes, it makes you more empathetic.
Yeah,
And I feel like especially in the world we live in today, there's such a lack of empathy for anybody
and that's the problem.
who thinks differently than you, who looks differently than you, who does things that are different than you. Like, and again, that
Votes
stems
differently.
back to like, oh, I'm weird because I homeschool, or, like, you're weird because you decided to be a stay-at-home dad. Like, dads don't do that. Like, so it's like, but people don't see there's always more behind somebody than what you see on the surface. Always.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you're talking about an adult or if you're talking about a child. If my child is having a temper tantrum,
There's a
there's a reason
for
behind
it. Absolutely.
And a lot of people, like I just saw somebody today on Instagram post something, and they were commenting about how they disagreed with this certain parenting coach's, approach to tantrums. And this woman was like, if your child's having a tantrum, just ignore it. They'll learn that it doesn't work. And it's like, no, what that teaches them is to stuff their feelings down, because if they show or express their feelings, whether they're good or bad or little or big,
they'll get ignored.
They're not going to get acknowledged. They're going to get ignored.
That's all heavy.
They're going to not show their feelings.
That's why the world is jacked up as it is right now, because that's where it starts, the root, right? We all have been through, or a lot of us have been through that type of subconscious trauma that's led to the programming into adulthood, and the cycle continues to repeat itself. And because we're not feeling good within, we're projecting that out to everyone else. And we're talking, that's why we're like, okay, well, you're homeschooled, and you're short, and you're tall, and you have big ears, and and that's why we're very judgmental, because it's really just a reflection of what the heart is. And a lot of people are unaware of that, but that's exactly what this whole thing is about. It's mental warfare and being able to release, to get down, to express how you're feeling, because if we can't do that, then we can't grow and heal. And now we're built up, and now we're projecting that on, displacing and projecting that onto other people, when at the very end of the day, it's the healing that needs to be done within, so we can all grow. Because otherwise we'd had more empathy. It's the lack of knowledge, and that kind of like just brings me back to what you said about experience, Jen. And you're talking about how your kids are able to experience a lot being homeschooled, and experience has become one of my top keys of life, because experience is knowledge, and within experience you create memories, and memories is all that you have to take with you. So experience as much as you can.
That's what life is,
right? It is. That's what. That's right. You want to be able to experience the most that you can, and so being able to do that is just going to help the development of your child. And so, I love that. I loved everything.
Yeah, and going back to like you saying, you're creating memories. Like, something I always try to remind myself, especially on those really hard parenting days, is we talk about how, especially our generation, I feel like, is becoming more open about like, oh yeah, we do have childhood trauma, even though like it doesn't have to be extreme, but it in some way, right? and we're trying to break that cycle, and like we have memories of childhood that maybe weren't
Yeah.
great, or you wish were different. And like I always think on those hardest parenting days, your kids are creating their childhood memories right
Yeah.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
today, I could have created a childhood memory for my kids
Yeah.
that they could then remember. And like I said, there's no perfect parent, but having empathy, having understanding, giving yourself some grace, and like, just putting yourself in someone else's shoes
At least trying to.
goes such a long
It's
way.
at least that's that effort,
Yeah.
right? That taking
But
that initial
having
step.
that-
Yeah.
Having that understanding that somebody, whether you understand what they're going through or not, just having the understanding that they are in other shoes, they're not in your shoes,
Right.
And something about that we lose track with the adults that we come across in the world is that they were babies that just grew up.
Yeah.
They're not just people that just sprouted the way that they are. They
Yeah.
just popped up.
We're
That's
still
how they
children.
are. Like
We're
we're
all
still
children.
children.
We're still children.
We're all still going through things, whether it was something that happened a long time ago and we never healed from it, or it's things that just happened earlier today and
Yeah.
we're still not over it. We're all still going through things. We were all babies that just grew up and had the life experiences that we had that led to us to where we are now.
To our programming,
And it's just
how we think and how we feel and how
exactly.
we operate, how we respond to
So
things.
if you can have that self-awareness for yourself to realize that, like you said, Jen, that you are human, give yourself some grace, and realize that other people are human, give them some grace, realize that they have some things going on too, and not be so reactive with each other with every little thing that goes on.
Everyone's entitled to their own feelings and emotions. You go through what you go through, and you're feeling how you feel because that's what you're feeling. And if people start to understand and grasp that, because at the end of the day, if you're feeling some type of way, right, about whatever it is, and you go to talk about that with somebody, you want them to understand you, right? So it's a two-way street. Right?
That's why you're opening up.
Exactly. So give somebody that same grace, right? It's like give them an opportunity, to express and get what's on their chest out because they're actually feeling something. Because we're all going through the warfare at all, and that's why we're here. The warfare is every day, on a daily. You know what I'm saying? And
Exactly.
getting that opportunity to release is what is the most important. What this is all about, and so.
And the fact that you want to take a step to share those feelings, because I feel like that's like the first step
Yeah.
in like
Oh,
the recovery.
I was just gonna
of,
say that.
you know,
I was
look,
just gonna say that same thing.
Yes,
Go ahead, Kyle.
but that's the issue with the world that we're in now. We're in a world that doesn't allow that, as to why we're all shelled up in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because the world is hurting, everyone is trying to hurt people, right? So everyone is trying to hurt people.
That defense
right?
mechanism.
Exactly.
It's just that shield that gets put up.
Exactly, and so that's that shield. That's a little immediately. It's an automatic thing, right? Because this is the way the world works. It's the way society has presented itself. This is the world we're living in, and so those are the rules of society. And because that's our programming, like we can't. It's hard for a lot of people to take that step without feeling judged or feeling like somebody's going to do something with the information that they've been given. It's just like, I just gave you my feelings. Like, this is all of me in a nutshell. Like, please don't do anything crazy with it, right? And so that's that
We're
vulnerability
sensitive towards that.
That's being
But
vulnerable.
because it's tender, because when
Right.
you have that shield up,
Absolutely.
that guard up, what's behind that shield, behind that guard gets soft because it's not being toughened out by
Exactly.
going through, it being expressed or anything like that. So again, I think we talked about this last time too, Kyle. You're not always going to get back what you're looking for when you open up. But if you can stay consistent with that for yourself, you're going to come across those people that do reciprocate that.
Yeah.
That's what they needed, was somebody to kind of show them that way, baby step them to that bridge, that kind of bridge of healing, right? And show them it's okay to meet me here. I'm here. I'm opening up. This is what I have going on. You can come here too, and it's okay.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't take that first step, it's just better for you to be able to do that and for your own reasons, right? But again, if you're able to do that for other people and show them,
Well,
it becomes that addictive thing
absolutely,
where they want to do it more and more.
And I want to piggyback that, because it's not, like you said, it's not just doing it for yourself. It's a chain reaction, right? Because if you have enough courage to go out and be like, all right, well, if I talk to someone, I'll tell them a little bit of my story. That bridge that you're connecting with somebody is just it's gonna be, like you said, contagious. Everyone is just gonna be like, okay. And then now we're building those connections, and now everyone else is starting to be able to get the things that they're getting off their chest and being able to connect, because that's what this is all about. It's about connecting. Like what you just said, what we talked about.
And our kids are going to look at that.
Exactly.
That's going to be a part of their
kids
programming.
look at that and they say,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like they don't have to, as an adult, hopefully, our kids won't have to grow up and say, like, and learn how to express their feelings. And I always, because there are a lot of parents out there who, maybe unknowing to them, dismiss their kids' feelings. And, like, it doesn't come from, like, a place of malice.
Right.
They're not a bad parent, but you do it unconsciously.
You're so caught up with
like,
what you have.
Your kid is, like your kid is crying, and you're like, you're okay,
Right.
you're all right. Don't, stop crying.
Yeah.
You're fine. And it's like, well, why are they crying?
Exactly.
And
Well, Kyle said that last time, I believe.
We did. We talked about that.
With your son,
That literally piggybacks. Just not just with adults, right, who have feelings and emotions and dealing with their own things as well. But it's like you talked about with kids being, and I love that you're in, early childhood development, because that is the root. It's like we're so dismissive of what our kids are feeling because we're going through a lot more bigger. We have bigger fish to fry, right? Well,
we have our checklist, like you were saying. We have all those checklists.
They
they don't have that checklist.
Right, their checklist is a lot different from ours, but they still have a checklist.
Exactly.
Right?
I need snacks. Number one.
Yes, exactly. But that's still their warfare. That's their warfare, right?
That's their warfare,
Right?
Exactly. Because we don't view it that way. We think that it's not a warfare. Like you guys don't understand. And that's their version of it. That's where they're at with it. Their emotional intelligence, their EQ isn't as high as ours. So their warfare is just as big in their world, if not bigger.
Exactly.
And their little brain, I always say this to people, and I said it, especially when I was teaching. And this was before I was even a parent. And now as a parent, I want to, like, get a t-shirt that says it. But it's like, your kids' brains are still developing. Yeah. Like, they don't have that emotional self-regulation yet.
Right, they don't have
that.
So I
feel like a lot of the time... No, and a lot of the time, it's like, oh, well, I'm allowed to yell at you because I'm the parent and you're, pissing me off or whatever. And it's like, but they're not allowed to get mad at us because that's disrespectful. And it's like,
what are we teaching?
You have to give respect to get respect.
I love that.
It goes the same way with your kids. Like, and again, I am not a perfect parent. There have been times where I have blown my lid because of, you're overstimulated, you're overregulated, whatever it may be. But if we want to teach our kids to grow up and be able to express their feelings and be able to stand up for themselves in what they believe in and, raise confident, secure kids, you have to teach them how to be emotionally regulated. And I feel like our generation didn't really have that. So now we're trying to figure out
as adults, trauma.
Yeah. We're
trying to
and it's
like, we grew up and it was like, like I grew up and, I had a great family and like, I was given a lot of opportunities, but like I was always the sensitive one. You're too sensitive. You're being too emotional. Like, and by saying that to a child, you're telling them that their emotions are invalid.
They're not okay to feel how they're
feeling. And then as I grew up, I was shoving my feelings down,
Right.
or I was trying to hold it in. I let people walk all over me.
And
And
then the times that you do
now,
release it, it's usually an explosion of those feelings because they were so suppressed for so long.
mm-hmm, yeah. And then I decided when I became a parent, I got this like wave of confidence. And I was like, you know what? Especially as a mom of little girls, like, I'm like, my daughters are not going to get, told they're too
Mm-hmm.
sensitive, or you need to be quiet, or know your place, or like all of those things. Like, kids need to be seen and not heard, and like all that stuff. And I'm like, no, you're a full-blown human
Mm-hmm.
being. Whether you're 1, whether you're 6, whether you're 25, you are a
Yep.
full-blown human being, and you deserve to take up space in this world. And
Absolutely.
people
Absolutely.
who are like, that kid needs to shut up, or that kid needs to be quiet, or that kid needs to stop crying. How would you feel if someone said that to you? I don't
Yeah.
care how
Mm-hmm.
old you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're allowed to show their feelings the same way that we're
Yeah.
allowed to. And honestly, kids often show more appropriate, self-expression and sharing their feelings than a lot of adults I know.
Yep.
So it's like,
Yep.
we have just as much to learn from them as they have from us.
Absolutely.
But going back to, you know, that release, that, the constant warfare that you might be facing, we need to take everything that maybe we weren't given and what we've learned, so that the next
That's
generation
it.
isn't so emotionally
We
stunted.
have Sean. We talked about this before, right?
Yep.
With our parents and the generations prior. It, like you said, Jen, we need to break that cycle, like of like
Mhm.
just. I mean, we live in a world, and it's kind of there's give and take, with the whole social media, but there's a lot to learn from the aspect of being able to be the best, to be what you want to be, to do what you want to love and make money from it, to be to make a living out of it. And so being able to do so and just having this awareness, being able to pay more attention to our kids is vital, and being able to break that cycle, because otherwise it's just going to continue cycling itself out. I mean, cycling through, and because a lot of the world is we're asleep, right? What you're saying right now is a lot of people aren't aware of, and even this is
Mm-hmm.
still like continuously to learn. Every day it's a learning experience for me. Being a student of life, that's what I've been trying to do, right? And being in doing so, I'm been able to take what you're saying, and now I'm going to apply some of the things and the gems that I've learned with my parenting, because that's what this is for. We have kids so we can develop them in a way that they feel they can be their best self and survive in the real world. And a lot of us are distracted with trying to develop ourselves, that we can't even develop our kids, right? And so that cycle has to be broken.
That's that balancing act.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I appreciate
Yeah.
you being on the show, Jen. That wraps up the time that we have on today. We're gonna have to definitely get you back on here because it was.
Time flew
Oh my
by. That
goodness.
was doesn't feel like it was an hour.
Absolutely, but I mean, I hope the people of the world were able to take something from that, connect. I mean, that's what this world is about. I mean, we have to connect to express so we can heal and grow. I mean, a lot of us are going through the same things, and having that awareness, having that empathy, right, Jen? Having that empathy, being able to be aware of somebody else's whatever they're projecting is probably some some trauma, some history of trauma. Maybe try
Gotta
and
get
figure it
that
out.
root.
Ask some questions. I mean, by nature, people like talking about themselves, and when you ask people questions, like, oh, they're interested in me. I mean, that's just like how we're built. That's what we're supposed to do. I mean, this is how we are successful, right? This is how we're able to be our best selves, is getting strategies, ideas. Like this whole homeschooling thing is a perfect example. I'm like, oh, well, this might be able to help my situation out. This might be able to help Tyson grow. This might be better for our family,
You talk
right?
about being a student of life,
Yeah.
like homeschooling is being like life is your school for
Yeah,
sure.
so,
Yeah.
That's why I love that you said the world is their classroom.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful statement. I love that.
And the way that we're able to put it in, right? School is the internship, and it's like you're already out there in the field, and I'd rather be out there in the field, right?
Exactly.
Because that's exactly what I'm trying to teach my son right now. Because it's a cold world, I'm trying to teach him to be prepared for that, and you're just immediately preparing him right now, and so that's a great perspective.
Diving in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's all, my peoples. Go ahead, Tom.
That is it. Jen,
This is so much fun. Thank you guys for having me.
no, thank you so much for coming on again, providing more perspective to things that I think there are a lot of common misconceptions about. You know, and you're definitely opened some eyes to it. I know you opened our eyes to a few things, and my wife does a lot of the stuff that you do too. You know, so you still were able to sprinkle some light on it. So I appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to have you go on here again soon.
Make sure you guys.
Anytime. As long as my kids are in bed, I am available.
Right.
Make sure you guys tap in, share, comment, like. What is your warfare? You know, we're all going through some things. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable a little bit. Share what you got going through. We need to connect.
Till next time. Thanks, everybody.